first and foremost. Just offering all honors, praise, respect, acknowledgement, and thanks to the great King of the universe, to the God of our fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, and the God of Yaakov. Thanking him for all things and everything. I bid you in the tongue of our forefathers, Shabbat Shalom L'Kol.
Shabbat Shalom L'Kol.
Thanking the Most High God for life. Thanking him for strength. Thanking him for food, clothing, and shelter. Thanking the Most High God because he is good and his mercy endures forever. Thanking him for my life. Thanking him for your lives. Thanking him for the lives of my family and the lives of your families. Thanking the Most High God for the life of my teacher, Amore Mishael ben Yisrael. Amen. Praying that everyone is well. So we're going to do something a little bit different today. First, I'm going to play a quick video. It's about 4 minutes. Before I play the video, I want to give context to it and just speak about a couple of things. So the video is called Developing Emotional Intelligence. And I want to have an at-length conversation about this concept of emotional intelligence and the benefits to emotional intelligence and how it benefits us as a people. And we're gonna go into a scripture, but I'm gonna read an article that I thought was telling, and the article was really beneficial to us in these days and times. And so I will also leave it out there that this would be, it'll be an open discussion, whereas if anybody has questions or items that they want to discuss or mention or talk about, touch on, please feel free either here or in the chat. But I think that it's important for us in our development as people, especially coming back where we came from, because we have to realize that, or we need to consider that God, the people who God sent amongst us or sent to retrieve us and bring us here, God clearly said that those people were our enemy. God clearly said that these captivities were gonna be just that, captivities. They were gonna be punishment. And now God was gracious enough to those of us who he allowed to be able to know his name, to be able to speak his name, to know Torah and be able to practice Torah. God was gracious enough to us for that. But one of the things that, if you compare us now coming back as slaves to us in the wilderness who came out of Egypt, who were also slaves, you realize that they had a whole lot of development that they had to do. They had a lot of issues, and part of the issues that they had coming out from slavery is some of the things that caused them to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, that caused them, so many people, to die. And so for us, I know they have these psychological terms, and oftentimes they tell us that the social sciences are hogwash and all of those things, but the social sciences are actually a representative of Torah, and a lot of it is representative of Proverbs and the things that you read there. And if we start to enact some of those things in order to make ourselves better, I think that it'll allow our communities to be better. So if you wouldn't mind to play that video, and then we're gonna talk a little bit.
Emotional intelligence refers to the ability to recognize, interpret, and process emotions in yourself and others. While genetics, upbringing, and environment all play a role, there are steps you can take to develop your emotional intelligence over time. Get to know yourself. Emotionally intelligent people are self-aware. They have a realistic appreciation of their strengths and weaknesses and how they come across to others. Peer feedback is one way of improving your self-awareness and may uncover a few of your emotional blind spots. Learn your triggers. Linked to the notion of self-awareness is knowing how you are likely to respond in particular situations. Think about how you felt the last time you were under pressure. emotions and the source of these emotions can shift your emotional state. Empathize. Seeing things from someone else's perspective will help you understand their values and beliefs. This is important when it comes to motivating and engaging others. Make a conscious effort to get to know your colleagues. Ask open questions and actively listen to what they have to say, rather than simply waiting for your turn to speak. Be on the lookout for body language and other non-verbal signs, as these may tell you more than someone is willing to express out loud. Own your emotions. Part of being emotionally intelligent is about taking responsibility for the way you interact with others. If someone upsets you, pause and reflect on why their actions led you to feel this way, instead of reacting impulsively. Recognize that a conversation is a two-way interaction, and it takes two people to make you angry, sad, or frustrated. Go with your gut. Finally, listen to your body. If your stomach starts doing backflips every time you speak to a senior manager, or your muscles tense up before you go into a meeting, what does this tell you? Counterintuitive as it might seem, emotions can be a valuable source of information when making rational decisions at work. Remember, emotional intelligence isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about learning how to recognize, process, and channel them in a way that benefits you and your team. Enhancing your emotional intelligence requires effort, but can be achieved with sustained practice.
Torah. So at work, one of the things that I appreciate, and the Most High God does the things that he does in the manner in which he does it. And I appreciate the Most High allowing me to transition from the previous job that I had to this one. The job that I have now, they put a huge emphasis on leadership, developing people, and things like this, emotional intelligence, things like that. So the reason that they focus on a lot of leadership with us is especially because all of us, we manage a department and we manage people, we manage individuals. And the goal of it is you want to be able to get the best productivity out of those individuals that you manage, but part of that means that you need to understand them. And in order to understand them, you really need to understand you. And so that's why when I came across this video about emotional intelligence, I thought that it was key, because so oftentimes we have these interactions that are difficult, and because we don't prepare ourselves for the interaction, it makes it difficult for us to be able to get our point across to someone else, and for them to be able to get their point across to us. So why is all of this important, right? Can you read Deuteronomy 4:6, please?
We're in Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 6. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Observe therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the peoples.
Amen.
That when they hear all these statutes shall say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people.
Amen. Come on, read the next verse, please.
For what great nation is there that hath Yah so nigh to them as Jehovah our God is whensoever we call upon him? And what great nation is there that have statutes and ordinances so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day?
So when you read verses like that, that's why us being able to properly prepare ourselves to present ourselves to the world is important. Because the presentation that we're supposed to present before people is supposed to be the presentation that people are supposed to get of God. Mm-hmm. God said things like, my peculiar treasure, a kingdom of priests, right. A nation of priests. That's supposed to be us. That means people need to be able to look at us and see godly things.
Right.
So now, can people see godly things from us when we flying off the handle all the time?
Negative.
Do people see, when people see us and we can't manage our own emotions and we're yelling and we're cursing and we're acting like this and we're acting like that, do we truly believe that that represents godliness, that people are going to want to come to us and say, yeah, I saw you using all the F-bombs, come take me to where you worship at? That's why things like this are important. I'm going to read the definition of emotional intelligence, because I know in the video it went pretty quickly, and touch on the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence, and then I'm going to focus on one for a little while before I read the article. Emotional intelligence is the ability to manage both your own emotions and understand the emotions of people around you. To manage your own emotions, for us to manage us, as well as the emotions of the people around you. Because what happens is, if you notice when you're having a conversation, as soon as you start to get worked up and agitated, the other person starts to get worked up and agitated. Straight out of Proverbs. Soft answer turneth away wrath. As soon as the other person, if someone is talking to you and they're having a conversation with you about something where they feel like they're offended, and your body language is, people realize that you're not receptive. People realize that we're not receptive. And we are a people that are coming from a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different places, a lot of different personalities, and we're all trying to mesh all in one place. And when I talk about all in one place, I'm not talking about the 8 different congregations in New York, because 8 different congregations in New York is not Torah. So for us trying to come together, we need to learn to understand each other. But in us understanding each other, that means that what? We need to understand ourselves. You need to know that sometimes when Caribbean, West Indian people be talking, that they not arguing in a fight not about to break out. That's just how they speak. Right. We need to understand those things. The 5 pillars of emotional intelligence are self-awareness, empathy, motivation, self-regulation, and social skills. The one I want to touch on for a little while is self-awareness. So I want to read the definition of self-awareness. Self-awareness is the ability to focus on yourself and how your actions, thoughts, or emotions do or don't align with your internal standards. What are our internal standards? Torah. Our internal standards are always supposed to be Torah, and so what self-awareness dictates is that our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions are supposed to align with our internal standards, which is Torah. And so us being self-aware allows us to recognize when our actions, thoughts, and emotions do or don't align with our internal standards, which are Torah. The rest of it is, if you're highly self-aware, you can objectively evaluate yourself, manage your emotions, and this is the most important part of self-awareness, align your behavior with your values, and understand correctly how others perceive you. Self-awareness. So, especially for leaders, people who have some sort of a leadership role, really for everyone, but especially for leaders, you have to understand that how people perceive you is important. Because if you have a shady and shaky character as a leader, people aren't going to see you as someone that they can go to for advice. If you're the gossip king, people aren't going to see you as one who they feel like they can confide in, because they know that you're the gossip king, and as soon as they confide in you, they've confided in the whole community. Certain things like that are important. One of the biggest misalignments of self-awareness that we as leadership have, or leadership or people in leadership positions, or all of those that they have, is that they believe that they can be in these corrupt and nasty situations, get past it, and people don't see you for that.
Right.
That part of it is important. It's important that when things come up, because things come up, things happen. We recognize that. We've all, in our years, things have happened. But when these things come up and we refuse to address those things and we leave people to their own opinions, guess what? People are going to remain with their own opinions. And so you're gonna stand up as the leader and you're gonna demand certain things as the leader, and people are gonna look at you like, man, you? For real? And we know we've done it all the time. Some of us are more vocal about it than others. Some people may listen to you as a leader just to give you the courtesy. Other people like me will see that you're speaking and you have a shady background and will get up and walk right out. And those are some of the things that we need to manage under our concept of self-awareness. I want to go into this article. And the reason that this article struck me is because this is a thing, this is an issue that we in the Israelite community have seen from the time that I came in 93 until now. And don't get caught up in the terminology. The title of it is The Misunderstood Reason Millions of Americans Stop Going to Church. So don't think about church. Think about the misunderstood reasons why millions or thousands or hundreds of Israelites stop coming to service. Or why they stop coming around. Or why they prefer to be at home watching on TV 3-4 different channels rather than coming out to service and have the camaraderie that God required when he said, you shall have a holy convocation. We have, and I understand, everybody has their reasons, and we assign intentions to the different reasons that people have for why they don't come out. Oftentimes, people stop coming, and you see somebody in the street, and you wonder, oh, they probably stopped coming because of this, or they lost faith in God, or all of these variety of reasons that we assign to why people stop coming around. We don't ask.
Right.
We don't inquire. We just assume. And so I have a couple of highlighted portions that I'm going to read from this article because in us trying to do two things. One, trying to reach out to people to ensure that they feel comfortable being back or ensure that they feel comfortable being in places like this in the first place. That's the first part. The second part of it is trying to keep our children from going out like a whole generation did. Mm-hmm. I'm more concerned with the latter, but everybody is equally as important. Because I remember that when there used to be a time when holy days and feast days, the place was constantly packed. Always packed. Nice, I mean, there was lines for meals where you had to give out tickets in order for people to eat. Where'd those people go? Why'd they leave? Why don't they want to come around? Do we stop and think about that? And even if we stop and think about that, which is the first step, then what are the steps that we're taking to counteract that? One, to get them back, but two, to make sure our children don't go. Because in the generation that I came up in, people had some really good ideas. People had some real high spirits, and then people just started to leave and fade away. And when people left and faded away, what we did was we made excuses for why we think they left rather than look inside of ourselves to think, is it something that we did that caused them to leave? The Great De-Churching. That's the name of a book that was written to describe, to give their interpretation or their understanding of some of the reasons that millions of Americans stopped going to church. The Great De-Churching. The Great De-Churching finds that religious abuse and more general moral corruption in churches have driven people away. This is, of course, an indictment of the failures of many leaders who did not address abuse in their church. Mm-hmm. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Does that sound familiar? And so, those are the things that I know we don't like to talk about, but those are the things that we have to talk about. Because I can guarantee you, whether we as adults like to talk about it or not, the youth, that's what they're talking about. The religious abuse and moral corruption in churches has driven people away. That's something that the youth talk about. That's something that the youth, the parents of the youth talk about. It's something that I know I talked about with mine, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not going to say I regret talking about it with mine, but I'm concerned. You know, sometimes you give information to a group that may not be ready to process it. And so when you try to address adult themes with those who aren't adults, it becomes difficult for them to process sometimes. And so what happens is oftentimes they take, and I'm not talking about mine specifically, I'm talking about generally, they take those issues that occurred onto themselves, and then they hold on to it, and then it's difficult for them to be around certain people. And who are those people that is difficult for them to be around? Those people who initiated religious abuse and moral corruption inside God's house. And in a time where we as a people should be reaching out to get people in, now is not the time where we're supposed to be locking people out. The indictment of the failures of many leaders who did not address abuse in their church. So, abuse in their temple, and abuse in their place of worship. That's one of the major reasons why when these matters of judgment come up, we push to get them addressed. We push to get them reconciled, because these open items of abuse have affected our community like you wouldn't believe. I want to sidetrack for a minute. I meant to talk about this earlier, so I think this is a nice segue to go into it now. So I was watching the polls, and Donald Trump is leading all of the Republican candidates. All of them. He's been impeached twice. It was twice, right? Yeah. They didn't do that third time yet. They just ain't have enough time. He's impeached twice. He's on his third indictment and still remains the popular candidate amongst Republicans and probably a strong candidate against Biden, because both of them are 80 plus, and if Biden don't stop falling, then Trump gonna win by a landslide. But he's still leading. 3 indictments. Like when the January 6th riots came along, he incited those people to go out there, climb those fences, climb those walls. When you looked at that on the news, this looked like something out of the movie White House Down. It was crazy. Incited all of those people to do that, right? Told them, I'll meet you over there. They went, and he went home. And watched on TV as people died trying to protect and quell the riot that he started. And yet, he's still a front runner and a favorite. That says to me that some leaders, it doesn't matter what they do and who they do it to, they're still going to have support.
Yep.
That's what that says to me. That's what that says to me. And so I try not to get worked up about it. I try not to get frustrated about it. I just have to accept that that's real life. Because what happens is, and if you listen to him, he actually speaks very small. He speaks very shrewd. He's not very intelligent, but he speaks very shrewd because he speaks to what his fan base wants to hear. And his fan base wants to hear, this is un-American what they're doing to me right now.
Right.
Those are the things that he's saying. And so for all of those people who continue to support, you notice, he never said, he doesn't typically say, I didn't do it. He typically exhibits that he doesn't care. When he lost when the jury ruled against him and said that he had to pay the lady $5 million for defamation, the next day he went on the radio and started defaming her again. And that says to me that there are some people that regardless to what they do and who they do it to, they're still going to get support. I have no doubt that God is going to deal with those people in the manner that God's going to deal with them. I have no doubt. However, we as a people need to stop that cycle of allowing our people to continue to be abused and not say anything, not do anything, not address it.
That's right.
That's on us to stop. God's going to do it in his time. The unfortunate thing that happens is when God steps in to do it, there's often a whole bunch of casualties.
That's a fact.
And so for those who take the stance that say, let God deal with it, usually when God deals with it, there's a whole bunch of casualties. When David said, because people love this part, when David said, let me fall upon the mercy of God rather than my enemies, because the mercy of God is far greater than the mercy of man. That's what David said. Am I right or wrong?
That's right.
And he fell upon the mercy of God because he didn't want to fall upon the mercy of his enemies, and 70,000 people died.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
70,000 falling upon the mercy of God.
Heck of a gamble.
Because it's our obligation. No, I don't want to say because. Period. It's our obligation to do whatever it is that we need to do to protect our people and the reputation of our people. It's our responsibility to make sure people feel safe.
That's right.
It's my responsibility to make sure that my family and my house feel safe. Same goes all around. It's our responsibility to do that. And oftentimes, that might mean that you're going to take abuse. You're going to take all of these variety of different things. People going to write letters about you, and they're going to do all of those types of things. I stand with God because that's the right thing. It says, contemporary America simply, so they addressed the part about leaders and the abuse of leaders. And now they're talking generally about America, and it says, contemporary America simply isn't set up to promote mutuality, care, and common life. Rather, it is designed to maximize individual accomplishments as defined by professional and financial success. Such a system leaves precious little time or energy for forms of, hear me, forms of community that don't contribute to one's own professional life, or as one ages, the professional prospects of one's children. Summing it all up in a nutshell, because America has us so busy distracted trying to pay our bills and make money, it doesn't leave enough time for us to have the communal life that we're supposed to have. Mutuality, care, and common life. We don't have that because we're so busy chasing what America is presenting. The American dream. We're busy chasing that. For those of you all who are not in New York City, those people who are chasing the American dream have been living on the street, sleeping on the sidewalk for days, for weeks. Some for years, but I was really referring to the migrants that came over. And the Texas governor that said to New York, oh yeah? Here you go. And just kept shipping buses.
Yep.
And at first New York was like, sure, send them. What is it called? Bring me your, I forget the term. Refugees? Your not the refugees, but the slogan. The aged and that American slogan. Them. Bring us them. And the Texas governor said, sure. And he sent them. And he sent them. And now you have all of these different people that you can't house, you can't provide for. But I'm going to get back to community. We talk about we want a community. And my response is, do we? We talk about we want unity. And my question is, do we know what that really means? Because oftentimes unity means that there's no I anymore. Unity means us. Unity means that I'm used to teaching twice a month and I might not teach 2 times in 4 months. That's what unity means. And for some of us, that doesn't work. Because some of us have left because the amount of time that we teaching wasn't enough and we wanted to do it all the time. That's crazy. Because we're so self-absorbed. We're so self-absorbed. The priests, in ancient times, you might have had priests that didn't get an offering for months. Because you had a bunch of priests.
That's right.
Because Levites make babies.
That's right.
So you had a bunch of priests. But what did God set up? But God set up certain things. He said, the priest who gives what? The sin offering, the skin is his. The priest who does certain things, this is theirs. But what he also said was, with these offerings, it's communal and everyone will come down and all of the priests will sit and eat together to make sure that everybody eats. To make sure that everybody eats. To make sure that everybody has a portion to feed their families. That's what community is. That's what unity is. So oftentimes, and again, I want to say this, I don't have an issue with Unity Shabbat per se. I have an issue of our lack of responsiveness after we leave Unity Shabbat. That's the issue. Because after Unity Shabbat, we're supposed to be so ready to start to do something positive and progressive together, not just start planning the Unity Shabbat in the next city so that they can get all of the money then. They get mad at me when I say this. They say Israelites need a school. They say Israelites need a community. I agree. Israelites do need a school. Israelites do need a community. I don't want to live around Israelites. Because Israelites act like everybody else. And if I want to live around everybody else, I'll just go live around everybody else without all of the extra Israelite title and people looking in my window and all those different things. But I can tell you what I know that community does from me moving to where I moved to. I know that community means that now when I get gas, I make sure that I get gas in my town, because I know that the taxes from the gas in my town goes to my town, which goes what? Back to me to make sure my taxes don't go up. So I don't go leave my town and get taxes in Queens. Get gas in Queens. No disrespect to Queens, but the money from Queens don't go back to my town. That's what community means. Community means that we support each other. Sometimes support each other means we might have to pay a little bit more until that particular individual gets whatever it is that they need to get together until they can lower the prices globally. That's what community means. That's right. But the support of it allows them to be able to do it. Right. Those are the things that community means. Community means that, guess what? If we go and we get some sort of a food program that we all buy into, that we don't have to worry about the fake meat that they selling right now and the lab-grown meat and the printed meat and all of those different things, that we don't have to worry about that. Mm-hmm. That thing that they slipped under the rug, that law that they passed as we were so worried about whatever we was worried about at the time, which I actually forgot. Yeah. I forgot what it was.
Probably a submarine or something.
It was the submarine. That's what it was. It was the submarine. We so busy looking for a submarine that exploded a week ago, and they passed this right under the table. Nobody thinking about now you go to a restaurant and you gonna get some DNA from some chicken that's a chicken mixed with a worm that they doing to try to make the chickens grow bigger. Because we looking for a submarine that they already knew didn't exist. Right. They say that, excuse me, numerous victims of abuse in church environments can identify a moment when they lost the ability to believe, when they almost felt their faith draining out of them. The book shows, though, that for most Americans, Israelites, who were once a part of Israelite temples but have since left, the process of leaving, hear me, was gradual. And in many cases, they didn't realize it was even happening until it already had. It's less like jumping off a cliff and more like driving down a slope, eventually realizing that you can no longer see yourself in the place where you started. Meaning that they were sitting in places just like this, and somebody said something. or somebody did something, or some act took place, or some act didn't take place. And that was the moment that they lost faith in God, because they felt like, how could these people who profess to speak about God so much allow such a thing to happen or do such a thing?
Right.
The moment that they felt it draining, the instant where it happened. And then so what it is they've gotten themselves so worked up to where they're so upset and they're so angry about whatever it is that took place. Whatever it is that took place, they're upset and they're angry. And they slowly start to filter and slide away. To the point that they don't even realize they left. And then what oftentimes happens is we look at the person leaving and we feel like they just lost faith in God. They wicked, they this, they that. And we're so judgmental. I have a hard time celebrating the good of certain places. I'm talking about Israelite places. I have a hard time celebrating the good for some of those places, because some of those same places have been the source of heartache and trauma for so many other people. We just don't want to admit it. We just don't want to talk about it. And because of this thing where we developed, where you don't talk about me and I won't talk about you, and I'm a firm believer, I'm a firm believer that this is not the place where we speak our own personal issues. I am a firm believer in that. I believe, however, that the manipulation comes in when people try to make it seem like when you start to address godly issues from a perspective like this, and from this vantage point where they want to tell you, you can't do that. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. If you listen to what God said to the prophet Jeremiah, God said to the prophet Jeremiah, go into the gate of God's house and say this.
That's right. That's right.
Go to the gate of God's house and say this. And guess what? People were upset. People went back and told the king. They told Zedekiah, Jeremiah is saying this. They went and grabbed Jeremiah and put him in jail. Amos. They did the same thing with Amos. Amos went and Amos spoke, and the priest, the high priest, came to Amos and asked him, why are you doing such a thing? I understand and recognize that there's a firm difference between, there's a fine line. There's a fine line. And so I do my best. I do my best to not go into those things where it seems like I'm overtly speaking about somebody, because I swear for God, I'm not. However, I do my best, and I've said this to myself, and I've fought with myself at times. Oftentimes, if you see me up here speaking and I pause because I'm trying to find the right thing to say where people will hear and won't be offended. But I'm trying to find the right thing, the right way to say what God knows we need to hear. That's right. What God knows we need to hear. And we stun our own development, we stun our own growth because we don't want to talk about it. And we say, you can't talk about this. And we say, everybody thinks different, and everybody places different, and all of those things, and that's the problem. Because we're so busy thinking about other people and not hurting feelings, and not nearly concerned enough about offending God. And that's the one who we need to be concerned about the most. And so it says, and I highlighted certain portions. And so it says, so the person goes and it goes away because their spirit just is unsettled anymore. They feel like they're not getting spiritual healing and spiritual nurturing and all of those different things anymore. And they go away. And then once that person goes away, then now they are hesitant to come back. Why? Because once you come back, the first question gonna be, well, where you been? And so they dread it. So then it goes on and it starts to talk about solutions, right? And they say, what's the thing that, and again, I'm just gonna insert Israelite places of worship, Israelite temples. I'm gonna insert that here. And I'm going to say what is more needed in Israelite temples, what's more needed in Israelite places of worship, what's more needed in this time than a community marked by sincere love, sharing what they have from each according to their ability and each according to their need, eating together regularly, generously serving neighbors, and living our lives of quiet virtue and what? Prayer. That's what we need. So I have no problem living in a community if Mech was my neighbor. Then again, they might be drumming all night, so maybe not. Let them live down the block.
For sure they do.
They're going to be drumming all night. Let them live down the block. I don't have a problem living in a community where I have certain neighbors. I have a problem living in a community with a person who I can't trust you. Why? Because I don't see sincere love from you, because you don't exhibit sincere love, because you're more concerned about the feelings of somebody else. You're more concerned about not making this person look bad rather than doing what? Tell the truth so that we can fix the issue. I don't want to live around people like that. I want to live around people who we're gonna go out together and we're gonna deal with this issue together. You heard me mention this note earlier, this letter that was written. I'm not gonna touch the letter that's written, even though I know I touched it already. But when I was ready to touch the letter, and I came and I spoke to who I needed to speak to about this is what I'm looking to do, you know what the response was? The response was, I'm behind you, let's do it. Because the letter that was written was atrocious, filled with lies, filled with misinformation, filled with out of context things. It was atrocious. And the only reason I haven't responded formally to it yet is because I had a meeting, and in the meeting, the individual swore that they were going to fix it. So I'm waiting for it to get fixed. I'm giving the opportunity for it to get fixed because they gave their word that they was going to fix it. And so when you wonder why all of our efforts towards unity are being thwarted, maybe we should stop and consider whether this was a sincere effort in the first place. Because just because you can get a bunch of people in one room where y'all can sing and dance and clap and do all of those different things and not talk about God, that's not unity. And I do recognize that we have differences. I get that. We have certain differences where we believe that the moon looks like this, the new moon looks like that, and other people believe the new moon looks like that. I get that. Those are things that prayerfully will work out if what? We continue to talk and converse. Right. Those things can be resolved. Open cases can't.
That's right.
Until an open case gets resolved.
That's it.
Open cases can't. And then so what happens is we don't want to, and I get it. We do business. We buy clothes from all different types of people. I get that. We do business with all types of people. I get that. There's also the portion where God said to Yehoshaphat, where Yehoshaphat was in business with the wicked king from Israel, and the business venture was fractured, and God sent the prophet to tell him, that's because you ain't have no business doing business with that individual in the first place. So that says to me that there's a separation and a line that we need to draw. How do you learn to draw the separation and the line? Self-awareness. Because you have to now understand and recognize what's important and what's not. You know, there are a couple of different types of sins. This is just my theory. It's not written anywhere. Just no need to quote me. There's a couple of different types of sins. There's a sin like idolatry, right? That if I'm an idol worshiper, that affects me. If I'm an idol worshiper, that affects me. That's one type of sin. If I'm a thief, that affects somebody else.
Right.
So maybe, just maybe, if I'm an idol worshiper, I can go to God and I can say, Yah, please forgive me. This is what I did, me, because it's me. But if you're a thief, before you go to God, you need to go to the person. And you need to fix that. Because that's the difference between the two. You need to go to them and fix that. In that same vein of what more can the Israelite temples do? They also indicated that perhaps it's more important. It reminds people that their identity is not in their job or how much money they make. They are children of God, loved and protected and infinitely valuable. And that's part of what the Maftir was talking about this morning. That when you go and you make people, the word of God is supposed to nourish and make people feel good. The word of God is supposed to make you feel worthy and accomplished. That's what the word of God is supposed to do. The word of God makes people feel beaten down when you are an individual that deserves to be beaten down. And it's our job to love, make people feel loved, protected, infinitely valued. So we come and we try to do the different things because our goal is to make people feel loved, protected, and infinitely valued. Unfortunately, you can't make an invaluable person, a person who has done nasty, wicked, despicable, nasty things. How are you supposed to make them feel valuable before they fix whatever it is that they did? It goes on to say, the problem in front of us is not that we have a healthy, sustainable society, that doesn't have room for an Israelite temple. The problem is that many Israelites have adopted a way of life. We adopted this. This is not anything from God. We adopted this that left us lonely, anxious, and uncertain of how to live in a community with other people. Because we don't know how to do it. Because some of us don't look to be communal. Because you can't be communal and worry about yourself all the time. Communal means you worry about the community. Communal means what the reason when I go places and when I do things, I can't think about me. I have to think about how will my family look at me if this. I have to consider how will the people from D.C.B. look at me if this. Because I feel, regardless to what, I stand here and I'm entrusted. I'm one of the ones that are entrusted to be able to speak the word to God's people. I'm entrusted with that. That's not something that I'm entitled to do. That's a job that I was entrusted to do. And because I'm entrusted to do that, the people who entrusted me to do that need to know that everything that I say and do and how I represent myself is going to be reflective of an individual that they can say, we appreciate him for the effort that he puts forth. We feel like God is in him for the effort that he put forth. And I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about that's actually all of us. Anybody who has the obligation and the responsibility to speak to God's people, because as you can see, the obligation of those pastors that God talks about of God's people, of his people, are held to a higher standard than the rest.
That's right.
Anybody else may have gotten the ability to say, shall we give you rebels water? Moses couldn't. Moses couldn't. And so we need to understand, as people who stand before God, we need to understand as people who stand before the nations in representation of God, that we have an obligation for when people see us, that they see a godly individual. We have that obligation. That means that we don't belong in certain places. That means we can't be caught doing certain things. That's our obligation. If you notice, a regular young girl, if she is caught playing the harlot, what happens? She gets stoned. If the priest's daughter gets caught playing the harlot, she gets burned. It's different. It says that the priest can't do certain things for being a chief man in the midst of his people. Higher obligation. It says the tragedy with Israelite places of worship is that they have been so caught up in the same world that we now find that they have nothing to offer these suffering people that can't be more easily found somewhere else. Meaning the reason that we aren't striving the way that we can and that we should is that the same thing that we're offering is the same thing that the world is offering, which is a one-day-a-week religious service. We're not meant to be a one-day-a-week religious service. We're meant to have programs constantly running because, as you see, our people are destroyed right now. Our people in Africa are destroyed right now because what's happening in Africa is a very interesting scenario, which is just like they carved up Africa with the Balfour Declaration, I believe. Just like they carved up Africa then, now they're rushing to carve up Africa again, and they're trying to, the U.S., Russia, France, all of those different countries are going into all of those African countries again, and they're setting up these military coups.
Yep.
They're setting up these military coups because they want to gain control of that country. The most recent one is they had a democratic election in Niger.
Right.
Democratic election. The guy who was the head of the army came in, they kidnapped the democratically elected president and went on the radio and said, I am your captain now.
Yep, basically.
And now they're trying to figure out what to do. And everybody is trying to get in touch with him. Why? Because the U.S. had put their support behind the president that got elected. The Russian mercenaries put their support behind the general who is the captain now. And they're trying to figure it all out. American churches have too often been content to function as the kind of vaguely spiritual NGO, non-government organization, an organization of detached individuals who meet together for religious services that inspire them, provide practical life advice, or offer positive emotional experiences. Too often, it has not been a community that through its preaching and living bears witness to another way to live. And so what they're saying is, we talk and we say the right thing. We say the good thing that make people feel good, and people go home feeling good, and that's the problem. They go home feeling good, and then we don't have anything else. Instead of through preaching and living, bear witness to what being a community means. And that's where we find ourselves. And so the last thing that I'm going to touch on this before I stop, is said, so they gave a couple of examples of a couple of different communities that he visited that was actually a community. And then he says, this admittedly is an extreme example of the community that he visited, but it says, but this community was thriving not because it found ways to scale down what it asked of its members, but because it found a way to scale up to what they provided to each other. And so what I'm saying is, we as a people, those of us who are in leadership positions and those of us who are not, we as a people need to learn, figure out, I want to say we need to learn, we need to figure out how to scale up our value towards each other so that we can figure out the best way to be a community again. All honors, praises, respect, acknowledgement, and thanks I offer unto the great King of the universe, to the God of our fathers, to the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzchak, and the God of Yaakov. Thanking him for all things and everything. I bid you in the tongue of our forefathers. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.